Father, Creator, Unathanahe Yoeji, we just thank you for this time of gathering this week and for tonight's lesson. We ask that you put it in our minds, put it in our spirit to understand what it's talking about so we can use it in the future. In Yeshua's name.
Amen.
Okay, you're on there, Donald.
Got it on?
He's got it on.
Is it red? Okie dokie. So,
Just follow him around.
what this is going to be, we keep getting fewer and fewer people, but that's one reason for videoing this, so that they can watch it if they want, if they missed it. So this is going to be the heart of the whole thing. So it's this thing I keep calling the Mishkan pattern. If we look at Exodus 25, Exodus 20 is where the 10 Commandments were given. Exodus 21, there's this word that I've used a few times called mishpat. I'll write it here in English letters, M-I-S-H-P-H-A-T, or the PH is the same as the F, so you could say it's M-I-S-H-F-A-T, mishpat, same word. That's Exodus 21. So right after he gives the 10 Commandments, it's called Parashah Mishpatim, and it's translated ordinance. These are the ordinances. In another place, this same word is pronounced judgment or right ruling. So it's basically this balancing of scales. And the reason I say that, the word is spelled mem, shin, pei, tet. So this is the word shofet, because this letter here is an SH, and this letter is a P or a PH, which sounds like an F, and this is the T sound, and that's the word judge. The mem, remember we talked about last time, said that this is the place of, or where something, you might say the application of. So if the concept of judgment is this non-material noun, mem puts it into a, puts the word into a noun form. So this is called judgment. So this is translated ordinance or judgment. But mem is a prefix, but shin is also a prefix. This word here, pei-tet, becomes then the root verb, which actually in the dictionary is stalemate. So when two people are playing a game and they end up being tied, it's a picture of, I might draw it like this, balanced scales of judgment. So here's just your basic scale, and where whatever you put in this side equals whatever you put in this side. So that's a picture of, in the court system, Lady Justice with sword and the scales and blindfolded. So if you look at Exodus 21, it says Parashah Mishpatim, these are the ordinances. When you look in Hebrew, it says, okay, these are the Mishpatim. The word ending in im is plural. And he said that Mishpat and Zadokah was the foundation of his throne. So you start reading this, and it talks about how to have equity in our dealings with one another. Basically what he's saying is this is how we get along. And the reason I'm mentioning this is in Exodus 21, is that Exodus 20 is the 10 Commandments. And those are the basic rules or laws. It's like, okay, how do we apply it? What is that all supposed to mean? Right out of the gate, Exodus 21, he tells you this is the way to put it into practice. So just like what Jim was saying, okay, you read the various parashah readings, but how do you apply it? He did the same thing. Here's the law, here's how they're applied. That's in Exodus 21. and 22 and 23 and getting into 24. And then you see it says parashah teruma. That's a different parashah. So if people are not familiar with what the word parashah means, it comes from the root word to parse, which is also where we get Persian, which is to chop something up into little pieces, like chapters. So when you're parsing verbs or you're cutting parsnips with a knife, it's all the same root word. Getting into Exodus 25 is now it says, Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel and let them take from me a portion from every man whose heart makes him, you shall take my portion. So again, he's giving everybody a choice. He says, these are the laws. This is how you apply them in your affairs to one another. And then he says, if anybody feels motivated and he wants to bring me something to Yahweh, this is what it's all about. In verse 8 it says, they shall make a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them. So this has to do now with Yahuwah, our Elohim, dwelling among us. Like everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle and the form of all its vessels, so shall you do. This is where he gives the Mishkan pattern. When it says, in everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle. What it says here is Aleph, Tav, Bet, Nun, Yod, Tav, Ha, remember that's the word the, Mem, Shin, Kaf, Nun. That's M, S, H, Mish, K, well that's a Kaf, K-N. So when I keep talking about the Mishkan pattern, this is where it comes from. This is a word spelled Aleph Tav, which stands all by itself. Bill Sanford wrote a book called the Matz. You have one right there, right? The Messianic Aleph Tav Scriptures.
Yep.
M-A-T-S, Matz.
Right.
He's gone through and identified every single place in the Scripture where this word spelled Aleph Tav is. The first place it shows up is in Genesis 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's the English translation. But what it says is, Bereshit bara Elohim Aleph Tav. But that word Aleph Tav is never translated. Nobody even knows why it's there or what it means. They say before this is the word, just so you know, Mem, Resh, Aleph, Hey. This is the word to see. And then Aleph, Av, Tav, Kaf, which is simply translated you. So this is actually caused to be seen. There's that prefix letter mem. So they've translated this as show. Allow to see you. You'll allow to see Aleph Tav pattern the Mishkan. English sentence structure is not the same as in Hebrew.
Use a different color. That doesn't show up very
Red's not showing up at all.
What about that light? Is that light going to help?
He needs that.
Okay. So here's another interesting thing. Aleph Tav.
Claire?
This is just simply translated as you, but Aleph Tav Hey can also be translated as you. This is Aleph, Vav, Tav, Kaf. And you could say, well, if the word to show is Resh Aleph, hey, that is the prefix letter Mem. So this somehow, remember this letter Mem puts it into the form of a noun or makes it somehow tangible, right? Or it takes like the word to know and makes it knowledge. So it's a non-substantive object noun. What is going to be this noun? He's going to show you, but in one place in Scripture you'll see Aleph Tav Hey written, and this is Aleph Vav Tav Kaf. But it's simply translated you. This Aleph Tav stands all by itself. Yeshua, in the book of Revelation, said, I'm the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Alpha and Omega. Well, that's written in Greek. So if it's Hebrew letters, it's not going to be Alpha and Omega. It's Aleph and Tav. So there's this great mystery that if Yeshua claims to be the Aleph Tav, nobody who doesn't believe that he's the Mashiach is going to believe that he's the Aleph Tav. So if I say that every time you see this letter Aleph Tav, even back here in Exodus 25, they're going to stop listening. Bill Sanford, I believe, says that whenever you see the Aleph Tav, it's somehow a reference to him.
Yes. His authority.
His authority. I would express it a little bit different. Who is he? Well, he's the Word in human form, walking amongst us. But what's the Word? Well, that goes back to John 1. That we've had this discussion a few times. We could kick it up tomorrow if people want to about John 1. But I would maintain it's all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And so just like we have a book, here's this cover and here's that cover, these are like the two book covers. So if somebody says, go get a book off the shelf, which one? Well, it's the paperback book with the red cover. Okay, so you're looking for paperback, not hardbound, and then you're looking for a certain color. And so this is the book described by what's in between the Aleph and the Tav. So if somebody says, well, is that talking about him or his authority? It's talking about all the stuff that's in between the Aleph and the Tav, including its entire communication and its authority and everything that it, everywhere place that it came from, that it is, and that it's pointing to. That's kind of like Yahuwah saying, the one who was and is to come. So to look at Aleph Tav, it's not just, oh, that's Jesus. It's everything that was intended, that was put in behind the Aleph, which is to say, before there was an Aleph, it's all that stuff that was intended that became all these letters of the alphabet broken up into these 22 pieces until the end, and then the fact that what he put into motion, Aleph, is going to be accomplished Tav. So there's even that concept. And there's a verse where in Isaiah where Yahweh says, as I have planned, so shall it be. Well, in studying the letters, all of a sudden I realized that's a way of saying Aleph Tav.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think Aleph is an ox and Tav is a sign, you could say here. Does anybody know what that is?
Musical note.
It's a musical note. What does it sound like?
Okay.
Now, how do you know that's the tone? How do you know it's not? It's just a note. That has no sound. That is just a symbol representing that there is a sound made reference to. But if I was to say, Ah, now you know exactly what note that is.
Yes.
You see, it's just a mark unless it finds itself in the proper environment which zeroes it into a particular. Just this is simply a symbol. It's a simple symbol representing the concept of a note. But you can't determine which note unless you put it in the context of a field of reference. That concept right there is embedded in the notion of the letters mem and nun. In that, the letter mem is water, and here you have here's this wave. Here the wave comes and it crashes down, and then you have the curl of the wave, and then you've got, the choppy waters. This letter mem shape, here's the curl, and here's the crashing wave type. That's letter mem. And the letter nun, they say is a fish, but nun isn't exactly a fish. The old form of nun was a seed with a sprout coming out of it, a little tendril of a root or a branch. Where's the fish? The thing is, the fact that you have something with something else coming out of it. So if this is the wave, and all of a sudden a fish jumps out, now you say, oh, there's the fish jumping out of the water. So mem nun doesn't necessarily mean water fish. It means here's an environment and something else is coming out of it. That's why earlier I said if you had pei in nun, I'm now correlating the natural sequence of letters, alphabet, gimel, hey, vav, het, yod, kaf, lamed, mem nun, and because the natural sequence mem nun is an environment and something else that lives in the environment and can jump out, if you have pei nun, this is the environment and this has something jumping out. And if I have bet nun, which happens to be the word sun, this is the word face, bet nun, well, bet is a house. So what is it that lives in the house and jumps out? A child. A child is born into a house, and then he grows and develops, and then he jumps out and goes and lives on his own. This is the word for son, S-O-N, or it might even mean daughter. So it basically is the word for children. So what I'm trying to say is that as you run through the alphabet, it's not just the meanings of the letters to look at, it's the relationships between the letters. And if you see the natural sequence, the letters in their order, it will tell you something about where that letter lives, as it were. So, as I'm trying to show you that something lives in an environment, like a fish in the water, or like a child in a home, or a word in a mouth, the letters live in their environment of the alphabet. And if the letter jumps out and then you want to look at it and do something with it, you're now looking at it out of context, and it's like seeing a note. But if you put the note back in its context, which is a staff, and even this you won't necessarily know. You could make this the bass clef, or you could make this the treble clef, and that changes. That changes what does that note. So what I'm saying is the more information you have, the more you can zero in on exactly what the writer was trying to communicate. So to say this is simply Aleph Tav, all that's doing is zeroing you in to this box. Everything else that's inside of it is not specified, but it's held in this big giant container. For then the information in here to magically, miraculously turn itself, transform into a human being, is this mind-blowing Twilight Zone sort of, what? How can these words in this book box of a book turn themselves into a human being. That's crazy talk. But that's exactly what the talk is in this book. And when Yeshua claimed to be the Aleph Tav, that's what we're talking about. It's not just to say, oh yeah, that's that guy, but it's what do all the words mean in the context of the referencing of all the other things in here. So as I'm trying to show you that, look at the order where Yahweh said this. He said, this is the Ten Commandments, this is the law. And his kingdom is based on balanced scales of working together. So the very next thing he tells us, this is how you live together with balanced scales of right ruling, and Jesse uses a certain word, protocol. The protocol is realizing that there are jurisdictions. The people that own this land are the ruling authority, and there's something about giving them the due dignity and the honor, which is the protocol. This land is owned by a certain person, but before that, this land was owned by the Cherokee, but there's this other level of this land right now being owned by the U.S. government or the state of Georgia. These are all different levels or echelons of jurisdiction, and for us to succeed in what we do, we'd be better off knowing the lines, the layers of who has what authority, what responsibility, and how do we honor that. And if we honor that, then we set up balanced scales of mishpat in our own life. And Yahuwah said, this is the way balanced scales of mishpat works. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. That's a fundamental law of the Aleph Tav. It can also be said, as you sow, planting seeds in the ground, waiting for a while, so shall you reap. Memnun. How is so as you sow, so shall you reap? How is that memnun? If mem is water and nun is a fish, what's the connection? Mem is the environment. The soil is an environment. You open up the soil and you plant a seed in it, and then there's a period of gestation, incubation, pregnancy. It's hidden, and then it grows and develops, and then it springs out of the ground. So for noon to be a sprout, here the root has sprouted out of the seed. But if this was buried in the ground, you wouldn't see that. So if this is the earth, if all of a sudden something sprouts up out of the ground, that's just as much a symbol as that's a symbol, as that's a symbol. It's all the concept that says a seed was planted, something is developing, and then it sprouts. It's the same exact picture of a woman becoming pregnant, the act of conception, developing the baby inside that you can't see until the day it's born. It's the exact same picture of Shavuot. 50 days of counting. You count 49, then you count 50. So, Memnun happens to line up with the festival of Shavuot. You've got wave. They went out and they cut the grain and they waved the sheaf. Where's the planting of the seed? It's another picture, it's another overlay. But then you're supposed to count 49, and then the 50th day, you harvest and you wave the loaves of bread that you've made. What I'm trying to show you by this is that there's different pictures, and the way to understand this code, this hidden message here is that you have to allow your mind to accept all these things fitting together, overlaying like clear sheets of acetate. You can take one and run with it, but I just tried to mix half a dozen of them together. Have I lost anybody yet? Are you still following me? Oh, okay. So the fact that this Mem Nun equals Shavuot, or some people call it Pentecost. It's like, wait a minute. No, Shavuot is, the Shavua is 7. So if you add the OT ending, that's sevens. But Pentecost in Greek, penta means 5. And the word cost, like how much does something cost, and you count out your dollars, the word cost means to count. So anything that's a multiple of 5 is also pent, like pentagram, or pentagon, like the military building. So this is also the number 50. So Pentecost is the 50th day. Well, the 50th day is the last one, which is like, oh, that's the celebration day. So technically, the letter Nun represents the 50th day. And guess what? The letters are numbers, and the number Nun happens to be the number 50. What a surprise.
Wow.
And in human gestation of pregnancy, a woman's pregnant for 40 weeks, right? The number represented by the letter Mem happens to be the number 40. There's another layer of it fitting the model. If I might say, well, let's look at this word that's simply spelled you, Y-O-U. I could say, and we talked about this before, this letter He means to express or reveal or to show. And then here's the Aleph Tav. So this is part of how this study of the letters works. If the Aleph Tav is this package of the whole thing, and then I could read Aleph Tav as, or Aleph Tav He as, Aleph Tav being expressed, or Aleph Tav being revealed, or Aleph Tav being put on display. But it's translated as you. So I can say, well, what's your chief job in life? The same thing it was Yeshua's. He said, I only do what I see the Father doing. I only say what I hear the Father saying. And so should you, if you want to walk in His footsteps and follow Him. So I choose to read Aleph Tav He as speaking to me. You. Express Aleph Tav. Huh? Somebody started to say something? No? Okay, anyway. But look, this is different. This is Aleph Vav Tav Kaf. They stuck a Vav in here, between the Aleph and the Tav. Now, if you look in the dictionary under the letter for Tav, you'll see that Tav, T-A-V in English, is probably spelled Tav Vav, because that Vav has a V sound. In the Hebrew, it says it's a mark, a sign, or some kind of symbol. If I do this, everybody knows what that means. That's number one. Because it's an inscription that carries with it a meaning that we're all familiar with, that we've all been taught to agree that that symbol references a singularity. If I wrote this, we've all been taught to agree that there are two different things. It's a double of that. Interestingly enough, just so you know, the modern Hebrew letter Bet is the same shape of the letter. So our number 2 in Arabic numerals comes out of the Hebrew letter Bet. and whether it's a B sound or a V sound, is without a dot, that's the